enforcer of Dead Mile. The Suburban idled down to a low, steady thrum, the kind of engine note you can feel in your bones. Jim killed it, and the forest swallowed the sound in one gulp. Out here, silence isn't the absence of noise. It's a presence. It pushes in, waiting for you to make the first mistake. We were at the edge of the DRZ. Officially, the designated restricted zone was a leftover Cold War survey project no one bothered to erase from the old Army paperwork. Unofficially, it was the most dangerous ground in Lassen National Forest. Jim and I had both been in plenty of bad places over the years, but the DRZ had its own kind of bad, the kind that breathes with you. The fog hung low, thicker in pockets, tinted faintly green like there was copper dissolved in it. I didn't like that color. Never had. I pulled the folded map from my jacket. It was a Frankenstein creation. Part U.S. Geological Survey sheet, part Ranger photocopy, part napkin from a mineral diner where an old-timer had drawn 3 X's with a shaking hand. I'd burned small holes at each X with a soldering iron. You could feel them with your fingers in the dark. Jim was already geared up, M4 slung across his chest, machete sheathed on his pack strap, 357 on his hip. He rolled an unlit cigar from one side of his mouth to the other while scanning the tree line. I checked my own kit, AR-15 with a short barrel, hatchet on my belt, 45 riding in a shoulder holster. Our weapons weren't for show. They were part of us, same as a samurai's sword. 3 miles to Dead Mile, I said, tapping the first burnt hole on the map. We make it there before nightfall. We're in good shape. Dead Mile, Jim muttered like it was the name of an old drinking buddy. Haven't camped there since the last time something screamed. We crossed the berm and stepped into the DRZ. The pines immediately closed in, leaning toward each other in unnatural angles. Bark seams spiraling like someone had twisted the trees while they were soft. The air shifted, pine and resin at first, then something underneath. Burnt hair, ozone. Half a mile in, Jim froze, one finger raised. I stopped dead, rifle barrel drifting toward where his eyes were aimed. Up ahead, maybe 50 yards, a figure stood in the fog. Tall, stocky, tactical rifle at the ready, the muzzle aimed toward the ground but held like he knew exactly how to use it. We both dropped to a knee without speaking. "Deputy," the man called, voice low but carrying. "Tehama County Sheriff's Office. You aren't hunters." We stayed where we were. Jim called back, "And you aren't lost." The man stepped forward into the gap between 2 leaning pines. Close now, I could see the details. Green BDU jacket, web belt heavy with gear, sidearm on his hip. His rifle was a wood-stocked Mini 14, the kind departments still issued in the mid-90s. He carried it like someone who'd fired it for more than qualification. "Name's Smith," he said. "2 hikers didn't make it back to Mineral last night. Brother and sister. Truck still at the turnout. Figured I'd check the DRZ before I call in search and rescue." "Brave move," Jim said, standing now but keeping his rifle at low ready. Smith's eyes flicked to our gear, our weapons, then back to our faces. "And you two are passing through," I said, checking a few landmarks. He didn't press. Men who know the woods know not to waste breath on questions that won't get answers. "You find my hikers, you holler," he said. Jim looked at me. I looked at Smith. And just like that, the 3 of us understood something unspoken. We'd travel together. Out here, 3 rifles pointed out is better than 2. We moved deeper into the DRZ, Smith falling into step without being told where. The forest changed with each 100 yards, resin bleeding black from the trunks, roots bulging out of the ground like tendons under strain. The fog wasn't flowing anymore. It hung in place, heavy, textured. Then the smell hit. Rot and copper, sulfur and wet fur. Jim's machete strap creaked when he shifted it forward. My finger brushed the safety on the AR-15. Somewhere in the timber behind us, a branch creaked, then another. Same note, half a beat later, from the wrong direction. Smith's voice was quiet. "That's not my hikers." "No," I said. "It's not." And that was when I knew. Something was already pacing us. We didn't talk much after we fell into step with Smith. Words feel expensive in places like this. You spend them wrong, you go broke fast. The fog had a weight to it now, not just thick but textured, like the air had skin. The green tint deepened in pockets where the trees leaned over the trail, needles clotted with black resin that bled like sap that had forgotten how to cool. Every 100 yards, the forest changed the rules and waited to see if we noticed. Smith carried his Mini 14, muzzle down, finger indexed, eyes working. He had a revolver on his hip, blued steel, 4-inch barrel, and the kind of belt wear you only get from years of draw and reholster. Jim led with his M4 and machete riding the shoulder strap. I walked tail with the AR-15 and a hatchet bumping my thigh, 3 rifles, 2 blades, 2 sidearms, 1 map with burn marks. At the first fork, we found sign. "Hold," Jim said, crouching. "There." We moved. The smell braided tighter. Wet fur left too close to a heater, penny metal on the tongue, and underneath all that a matchhead sulfur that nipped the sinuses. Once you smell it out here, it becomes the clock you keep time by. It tells you how far you've crossed without a compass. Something paced us. You could feel it like a second pulse that didn't belong to your body. The forest has 2 ways of telling you you're not alone. It goes too quiet, or it starts to rehearse you. We got the second. A branch creaked to our left, and then, a half beat later, the same exact creak to our right, pitch perfect, like a sound practicing itself. "You hearing that, deputy?" Jim asked without looking back. "I hear it," Smith said. No bravado, no shake. "It doesn't want to be seen yet." "Good," I said. "We'll let it want things." We crossed a shallow draw where water didn't move, just lay there mirror black, reflecting the canopy like a better version of it. My fillings hummed when I swept the wand. The needle pegged and jittered like a lie detector sick of being lied to. "Veil's thin at the rib cage here," Jim murmured. Smith didn't ask for a definition. He didn't need one. Men who've stood in doorways they shouldn't have learned to name wind by its temperature. Past the draw, the trees twisted more. The bark seams corkscrewed the wrong way, countered to the sun, and the limbs on a pair of sugar pines had fused halfway out like 2 hands that shook and never let go. Hair, gray, human fine, kinked as if heat had pinched it, caught in manzanita thorns at a height that made my scalp itch. "Not deer," Smith said. "Not elk either." "No," Jim said. "Something that borrows." The prints changed. The girl's tread vanished for 4 steps, then reappeared clean, too clean, as if she'd walked across glass and left no dirt. The boy's stride went long twice and then short, enough that I pictured him half carrying her over something neither of them trusted. We found the first voice at the next bend. "Hello?" It said from behind us, soft, friendly, an old man's tone like a neighbor at a fence. We turned as one, nothing but fog, wet trunks, a stone the size of a pig sleeping under a skirt of moss. "Hello?" it said again, same word, same pitch, but from up ahead. The mouth you hear in that word is always the wrong shape in your head. Too many teeth. Smith's jaw worked once, twice. "Heard that in the Ishi once," he said. "A long time ago." "Yeah," I said. "We didn't answer the forest. You don't feed things that beg with your voice." We came down into a pocket where the ground turned to ash under the needles. You could smell charcoal, old and wet. Somebody had taken a stick and dragged it into the ash in a pattern that wasn't language but wanted to be. Angles stacked inside angles, the same geometry of the bone tripod we'd seen from the ridge last year. My boots scuffed the line and the ash closed over the mark like skin over a small cut. The pacing weight above us shifted. Branches flexed without shedding water. A bird clucked twice and then chuckled wrong, like a man trying the sound on for size. Smith stopped dead and pointed low with the barrel of his rifle. There in the duff, 3 impressions like a hand had settled and pushed off. Not squirrel, not cat, not raccoon. Too long in the finger, the middle 2 too even. The thumb set at a wrong angle, like a human print sketched by someone who'd only seen hands in a book. The smell of sulfur brightened, sharp as a struck match in a church. "Skinny," Jim said, softer now, like you'd speak the name of a sick child. The trail tilted up. The fog thickened until the world shrank to a tunnel just wide enough for 3 men and their guns. We walked the center to keep the sides from swallowing a boot. Little deer prints crisscrossed the path. The heart-shaped cleaves were neat and off. The angles were too symmetrical, like a chisel had cut them, and the stride didn't add. Long, short, long, short, as if the animal remembered itself one step at a time. It went quiet then. The rehearsing stopped. The second pulse faded. Sometimes that's worse. Why'd it back off? Smith asked. It didn't, I said. It just started thinking. The map's first burn hole, my fingertip knew it without looking, lined with a boulder field ahead. 2 bends past that, if memory held, Dead Mile waited with its black snag like a broken tooth. We wouldn't camp there tonight, not yet. But you measure your soul against the places that name themselves, and the mile named itself a long time ago. We cut along a basalt lip, where the trail pinched to the width of a man. Below, 30 feet of slope littered with deadfall and rotted punkwood. The hair on my forearms lifted without wind. I didn't hear anything. I remembered hearing. It's different. Your bones replay a sound your ears never caught the first time. Stay center, I said, low. Don't step too close to the edge. We didn't. We made the lip, slid down the opposite side, and the world opened into a narrow meadow strangled by alder and fog. There was a campsite there, old. A ring of stones, a black disc where fire had been, a canteen half buried in leaf mold. Smith knelt and dug it out. The canvas strap had mildewed to threads. A tin cup hid under the rim, dented twice the way cups dent when people clink them in a hurry. They stopped, Smith said, and then they left fast. Which direction? Jim asked. Smith pointed with his chin. North side. Look at that alder. Bark rubbed with something greasy. Someone grabbed it, maybe fell into it. There's oil from the hand with dirt under it. He was right. The smear had fingerprint loops and a darker streak down the middle like someone had carried their fear in their palm. The fog shook. Not wind, not a distant tree giving up a limb. The fog itself shook, as if something big had displaced it from above and the air was getting its balance back. Jim's machete strap creaked when he nudged it forward. Smith brought the mini up, not high, not low. Middle, the place where the next mistake shows its throat. Hello? The voice said from the alder itself, inches from Smith's ear. It wasn't a word now. It was a shape of sound wearing the word like a skin. Smith didn't whirl. He pivoted. His rifle never crossed my body or Jim's. He put the muzzle into the leaves, and the leaves didn't part because there was nothing to part. Only the smell, fur, hot metal, sulfur, now strong enough to live behind the eyes. Something ran across the canopy then, fast as a man can sprint, lighter than a man should be at that speed. No brush crash, no bark scrabble. Placed weight, practiced. We moved out of the meadow into tighter timber, 3 shadows pulling a 4th behind us that didn't cast right. The trail narrowed to a cut between 2 nurse logs, and the smell thickened so much the taste went chemical. A low rock pinched the path, knee-high, and on its top a small gift had been arranged. A braid of hair tied with a strip of shirt hem, a button nested at the knot. The button was blue plastic with a nick at 12 o'clock. I'd seen its twin on a department store windbreaker 2 bends back. Smith didn't touch it. She left this? He asked. No, I said. Someone brought it. The hair wasn't all one head. Blonde, dark, gray, a red strand in there like a warning flare. Some knots are for binding, some are for memory. This one was for practice. Behind us, the woods laughed once. It was my laugh. I recognized my own old injury in it, the slight hitch in the breath. It wasn't a recording. It was a man's ghost of my sound, thrown back at me in a voice the forest keeps for pranks and funerals. Keep walking, I said. Eyes up. Don't give it the front of your throat. We pushed to the ridge where the soil went sandy and the pines gave way to snags. The light, such as it was, turned thin and green as bottle glass. I marked the second burn hole with my thumb. 2 more bends and the black snag would show itself like a finger pointing the wrong way. The old sign for Dead Mile. The thing above us paced again, closer now, impatient. You can hear impatience in the way weight lands, less thought between steps, a hunger for mistake. I let it learn us. I let it time us. Predators want the easy version of you. We kept giving it the difficult one. We hit a saddle and the world sighed, a long, low note you feel in your teeth, the veil's tension wire humming. The radios in our packs ticked once, though none of us had switched them on. Static that didn't belong to us ran a fingertip down the antenna and quit. We stepped into a stand of trees that had grown wrong on purpose. The trunks kinked at human height like knees bent the wrong way. The branches above knitted into a roof so tight the fog lay on it like a blanket and drooled. Between two trunks, something had taken mud and finger-painted a face. Not a good one. A circle for a head, straight slashes for eyes, a long thin mouth that curved up and down at the same time. In the mouth, someone had pushed 7 pine needles like teeth. 7, Jim said. It likes the number of us and it's counting wrong. 3 men, 2 hikers, 2 it thinks it wears. I didn't say what I was thinking, that it was practicing our number, and practice is how the skinny gets better. The forest drew a breath that wasn't ours. The green deepened to bile. The rot went sweet for a second, like meat warmed past the point of salvage. The branch above my head lowered without bending. Leaves brushed the crown of my cap, though the limb hadn't moved. Time, I said. We keep to plan. 2 bends more we get eyes on Dead Mile. We cut a sign circle, and we don't bivouac until we deal with the skinny. Copy, Jim said. Copy, Smith said. We moved, rifles up, blades ready for the overgrowth, every step landing where we wanted, not where the forest suggested. Behind us, above us, with us, the thing stalked and learned and went quiet when we looked up. It had our pace now. It had the shape of our breaths. It had our footprints memorized like a hunter. Dead Mile waited ahead with its black snag and its old pinned wind. And somewhere in the trees above Dead Mile, something bigger than our problem was listening. The one that doesn't borrow skin, the one that enforces. But before we got there, the skinny would try us. The forest rehearsed my voice again, just once, soft as a hand on a door. Butch. We didn't answer. We walked on. The forest kept my name. It didn't say it again. Didn't have to. We moved in silence, but it was the wrong kind. The kind where sound waits in the corner, deciding which of you it wants first. The trail pinched down between 2 volcanic outcrops and dropped us into a shallow draw choked with fog. The green tint had gone darker, closer to bile now, with that copper sulfur stink braided tight enough to feel on the teeth. Smith took point here, Mini 14 tucked in tight, eyes sweeping low to high. His boots knew the weight of the ground before his eyes saw it. Jim and I kept our muzzles up and our barrels moving, not frantic, just steady, like men who'd learned long ago that the thing you're watching isn't the thing that gets you. The draw's floor was soft ash over duff. It whispered under our boots. We passed a set of the hiker's prints, girls' small tread and limp, boys' longer stride. Frozen mid-pattern, like they'd stopped together. Then the tracks turned sharply left, vanishing into an alder break where the branches had been stripped bare of leaves as if by fire. No scorch marks, just gone. They didn't walk in there, Smith murmured. They were pulled. Jim crouched and swept his machete tip through the loam. No drag marks, no claw rakes, just absence. Above us, the pacing started again. Branches flexed, weight moving from limb to limb. This time it didn't care if we heard. It's testing, I said, seeing if we keep formation. We did. The trail angled upward, climbing toward the rise where Dead Mile's black snag waited. That tree was the oldest thing in this stretch, older than the DRZ fence lines, older than whatever boundary the Veil used to keep tight. It had been hit by lightning twice in my lifetime and still stood. Bark flayed off in long strips, upper limbs like a crown of antlers gone to rot. A crow cawed once from somewhere up the slope. Another answered immediately from behind us. The same pitch, the same pause. I didn't need to look at Jim to know his jaw had gone tight. The skinny was rehearsing in the open now. We topped the rise, and there it was, Dead Mile. A narrow corridor of trail between 2 ranks of black-barked trees, each one dead but still standing. their tops shorn flat like something had cut the world with a straight edge. The ground here was different, sandy in patches, glassy in others, as if heat had flashed through long ago and fused the soil. Smith stopped just short of the threshold. "You feel that?" He wasn't talking about the wind. There wasn't any. The air was heavier here, as if the green fog had thickened into something you could push with your palm. The smell was layered, rot, sulfur, burnt metal, but under it all was something worse. The cold, wet rock scent of a place that hasn't seen sunlight in a long, long time. Jim tilted his head, listening. "It's not above us anymore." "No," I said. "It's here." A shape shifted in the tree line ahead, just a shade deeper than the shadows, moving slow, smooth, like a man who didn't want to be a man. It didn't step forward. It leaned, testing the edge of the fog. The green light slid over it in pieces, a shoulder, a bent knee, the pale suggestion of a face that wasn't put together right. Smith raised the Mini 14. "Say the word." "Not yet," I told him. "It's not ready. Neither are we." We entered Dead Mile single file, rifles up, barrels steady. The snag loomed ahead, taller than the rest, the heart of the mile. Branches high above clicked once in the still air. Not wind, not wood settling. The skinny's patience was almost gone. We kept walking. Dead Mile was the kind of place that made you check your back trail without realizing you'd turned your head. Every tree in that corridor stood dead and straight, bark blackened like old ship timber, their roots clawing through glassy soil. The air was so still that when we spoke in low voices, the sound seemed to sink instead of carry. We set up a fire near the tallest of the dead trees, its lightning-flayed trunk silvered in strips, the upper branches twisted into the shape of a crown that didn't belong to any tree. Jim and I moved like we always do, one man watching the woods while the other works, while Smith scouted a perimeter without being told. It wasn't a comfortable camp. The ground was wrong under the boots, soft in some places, hard as poured stone in others. Every so often you'd hit a patch that felt hollow, like stepping on the roof of something you weren't invited into. We kept our rifles within arm's reach, sidearms holstered, blades laid out in the open. The fire was small, not enough to throw shadows far, just enough to make coffee and mark our center. The pacing started again as the light thinned. Up in the dead branches above the mile, weight moved without sound, without snapping anything. Sometimes it tracked right over us, sometimes it circled, never showing itself in more than a flicker between trunks. Smith came in from the perimeter, rifle cradled, eyes working. "It's tightening the circle." "Good," Jim said flatly, setting his machete within easy reach. "Means it's hungry enough to be careless." We didn't eat much. Coffee, a strip of jerky, enough to keep the hands from shaking when the skinny got close. The air had thickened to a bitter stew, rot and fur and hot copper, with that sulfur burn stinging behind the nose. The fog pooled green under the dead canopy like a gas leak. Then the skinny started talking. At first it was just a crow's caw, perfect pitch, from the far end of the mile. Then it was Smith's voice saying, "Hold your six." Then it was mine, a laugh I hadn't made in 10 years, echoing off dead wood. The three of us were already on our feet, rifles angled out from the fire, branches flexed directly above. Slow, deliberate. Smith whispered, "It's coming down." We heard the drop before we saw it, a slither of movement down the snag, head first, hands splayed too wide. It came into the green light, knees bending the wrong way, head cocked like it was tasting us with its eyes. A mutilated head like a twisted buck. Antlers spanning 3 feet across, with rotten flesh hanging from them. The skin was a matted gray-brown, stretched thin over joints too long, fingers like splinters with nails honed to points. It froze at the edge of the firelight, just beyond the circle, head tilting from me to Jim to Smith. Then it smiled, too wide, too many teeth, and the sulfur smell hit like a slap. Jim was steady as stone, barrel tracking center mass. "Your call, Butch." Before I could answer, the forest moved. Not the skinny, the trees. The canopy above exploded with a sound like a freight train punching through the mile. Something huge dropped into the branches overhead, shaking the dead trunks to their roots. A blur of black hair and muscle ripped through the air, and the skinny screamed, high, human, desperate, as it was yanked up into the canopy. It never touched the ground again. The tearing started immediately. Not flesh against blade, flesh against strength. The sound of something big enough to split a man like wet paper. There was no struggle, just impact, tearing, and silence. Two halves dropped from the branches a heartbeat later. One slammed into the fire, hissing as it smothered the coals in a rush of ash and meat stink. The other landed on the dirt 2 steps from me, twitching once before going still. The canopy shook again. Then nothing. No footfalls, no breath. Just the heavy quiet of something that had already decided it didn't need to be seen. Jim's eyes were locked on the tree line, but his voice was calm. That wasn't for us. No, I said, watching the green fog settle back into place. It was for us to see. Smith glanced from the carcass to the empty branches. You two know what that was? Not exactly, I told him, but I know what it does. Enforces the line. And then the 3 of us stood in that dead corridor, rifles in our hands, smoke curling off the fire, the stink of the skinny's death heavy enough to chew. Above, somewhere past sight, the thing that had saved us without being our ally moved away into the green. It didn't look back. It didn't need to. The dead mile stayed quiet after it was over. Too quiet. The skinny's halves lay where they'd fallen. One a blackened lump in the fire pit, the other sprawled on the dirt like a puppet cut from its strings. The green fog curled over both, as if the forest was already deciding what to do with them. We didn't speak right away. We just stood there, rifles in hand, listening to the canopy breathe above us. Somewhere in those high branches, the enforcer was moving off. Slow, deliberate, the way a man walks after a fight he didn't have to win. Smith broke the silence first. We keep moving. I don't want to be here when something comes looking for that. He was right. We kicked dirt over the fire, cinched our packs, and filed out of Dead Mile. The black snag watched us go, its crown of broken limbs clawing at the fog. Past the mile, the terrain changed again. The ground pitched and rolled like an ocean swell frozen in place, the roots of old pines jutting out of slopes in tangled fists. The fog here wasn't just green, it had depth, like we were walking through water and the surface was far above our heads. The smell shifted with it. The rot was still there, but now it had a sweetness to it, like flowers left too long in a vase. Underneath, a sharper stink, ammonia and bile, cut through in waves. Jim slowed at the crest of a low rise and held up a fist. Smith and I froze. Below us, in a shallow basin, something stood in the fog. At first I thought it was an elk. Big shoulders, antlers sweeping high and wide. Then it turned its head, and the truth settled like ice in my gut. The head was wrong. Too long in the jaw, the mouth hanging open in a soundless breath. Its eyes were gone, just 2 black sockets sunk deep into hide that had dried and split. The skin across its ribs was tight as drum leather, each bone visible, but the belly was sunken all the way through. It wasn't just starved, it was hollow. You could see daylight through a gap where its stomach should have been. The fog swirled through it, twisting in the space where organs once lived. The thing stood still for a moment, then twitched, a short, sharp jerk that ran from its shoulders to its hooves. The antlers tilted toward us, and the sockets turned our way. Smith's voice was a whisper. What in God's name? Not God's, Jim cut in. Keep low. The hollowed elk moved then, not walking, but gliding, each step too smooth for joints to manage. It didn't lift its hooves high enough, and yet they never caught on root or stone. It passed within 30 yards, the fog roiling in and out of its hollow chest like it was breathing smoke. We held still until it vanished into the green. Even then, none of us moved for a full minute. That's not hunting, I said finally. That's patrolling. Patrolling what? Smith asked. The same thing we're heading for, Jim said. The Veil. The word hung in the fog like a stone dropped in deep water. We pressed on, slower now, every step measured. The forest around us was bending more with each mile. Branches curled toward the ground, tips blackened as if dipped in tar. Bark seams split open to reveal pale wood that pulsed faintly under the skin. Twice we passed clearings where the ground was perfectly flat and ringed with stones that weren't there naturally. The air in those circles was colder, stiller, and carried no sound, not even our own footsteps. By the time we made camp for the night, the smell of sulfur had been joined by something new, sharp, chemical, like spilled battery acid. It made the eyes water if you breathed too deep. Smith set first watch. Jim and I sat in the fog with rifles laid across our knees, both of us staring into the dark where the hollowed elk had gone. Because somewhere ahead, closer to the Veil, there would be worse. Much worse. The night gave us nothing. No wind, no calls, not even the pacing we'd gotten used to. It was worse than noise, a silence so complete it made you start checking if you were still making any sound at all. Jim and I took turns with Smith, 2 hours apiece, rifles in our laps and eyes working the fog until the black became the gray of pre-dawn. When the light came, it wasn't much of a comfort. The fog here didn't burn off with the sun, it just changed shades, from green-black to green-white, thick enough to beat on the barrels of our guns. The battery acid stench was sharper now, backed by the hot metal tang of a machine that's been run too long without cooling. We broke camp without talking, the fire nothing but damp ash. The trail pitched down into a narrow run where the trees leaned hard over the path, branches knitting into an arch that let only a dim smear of light through. "This is it," Jim said quietly. "Veil's close." He was right. You could feel it in your bones, that faint hum in the jaw, the hair lifting on the forearms without wind. My map's last burn hole lined up almost exactly with the cut in the ridgeline ahead. Half a mile in, the smell hit us in a single wave, rot so deep it was sweet, sulfur riding on top, with a bitter note like burning plastic. Smith froze, rifle tight to his shoulder. Movement. I saw it too. A shape against the pale fog, still at first, then leaning forward on limbs too long for its body. It was tall, 8 feet at least, maybe more, its outline too thin in places and too wide in others. The legs bent the wrong way at the knee, and the arms hung past where its knees should have been. The fingers were black, long, and tapered to points like knives. It moved in a stutter, still for a second, then sliding forward in a blur, then still again. Each motion too fast for the distance it covered. The head was a narrow oval with no mouth that we could see, just a pair of deep-set pits where eyes might have been. Jim's voice was low, steady. "You've got eyes on the knifeman?" That name stuck the second he said it. The thing tilted its head, not side to side, but in a slow spiral, like it was unwinding something inside its own skull. We spread out by reflex, Jim sliding left into the shadow of a leaning pine, Smith taking a knee to cover the right. I held center, AR-15 tight into the pocket. The knifeman moved again, 3 steps without lifting its feet, closing half the distance in less than a second. It stopped 20 yards out, fingers flexing, points catching what little light there was. Then it came. Not a charge, a fall like the world had tilted and it was sliding downhill on invisible rails. I fired first, 3 controlled rounds into center mass. Smith followed with the Mini-14, Jim with a tight double tap. The hits landed, but the knife man didn't fall. It jerked back into the fog, limbs flaring, and for a second we saw it stretch, legs and arms lengthening unnaturally as it moved. "Flank!" I barked, and we shifted positions, rifles covering the arc it would take to circle us. A shadow flicked past in the tree line, then another, then nothing. We held for a long minute. The knifeman didn't come back, but it had been close enough for me to smell it, not just the rot and sulfur, but something worse. Something alive under all that, like meat kept barely warm. Smith exhaled, slow. "That wasn't a hunt. That was a warning." "No," Jim said, slinging his rifle forward again. "That was a taste test. We moved on, faster now, the ridgeline rising ahead. Every step brought the hum higher in my bones. The veil was close enough to feel. And somewhere in that fog, the knifeman was pacing us again, not rushing this time, waiting for the place it wanted to finish what it started. The hum in my bones built with every step. By the time we crested the ridge, it was in my teeth too, a low vibration like the whole forest was idling just under my skin. We came out onto a shelf of broken rock. Below us, the land dipped into a shallow basin maybe 200 yards across. The fog down there wasn't drifting anymore. It was spinning, slow, like water circling a drain you couldn't see. The green was darker in the center, shading toward black. "That's it," Jim said quietly. "That's the breach." It didn't look like a hole. It looked like the air had been bruised, a bruise that kept deepening as you stared at it. The trees around the basin leaned away from it, bark split wide, roots bulging like they were trying to crawl backward. Shapes moved inside the fog, some tall, some low to the ground, all wrong in proportion. One scuttled on limbs too many, another drifted without touching the earth at all. Smith took a knee, scanning through his irons. "I count 6, maybe 7 things down there. None of them elk, none of them anything I've seen before." "Don't count on that number staying the same," I told him. "The veil's thinned enough here that things can come and go without you seeing the in or the out." Jim eased his pack off and knelt to unzip it. Inside was the black foam case we'd been carrying since Mineral. He flipped it open to reveal a short, heavy rifle with no visible barrel vents, wrapped in copper wiring that led to a compact generator unit the size of a shoebox. Smith's brow furrowed. "That's not standard issue." I checked the ridgeline again. The knifeman wasn't visible, but the fog on our flank shifted just enough to tell me it was there, watching, waiting for us to go in first. "We move to the basin floor," I said, "fast and low. Find the thinnest point, get the readings, and if the knifeman wants a second round, we finish it here." The descent was worse than it looked. The rock crumbled underfoot, sliding in sheets, and the hum in the air thickened into a pressure that made my vision pulse at the edges. By the time we hit the basin floor, every breath tasted like sulfur and old pennies. Up close, the breach's edge was visible. Not a line on the ground, but a shimmer in the air, like heat rising off asphalt. Inside it, the fog was a deeper green-black, thick enough to hide everything except motion. A hollowed elk staggered out of the shimmer, head tilting toward us. Its sockets were empty, but it knew we were there. It took 2 steps forward, then froze, ears twitching toward something in the trees above. That's when I heard it, a weight shifting high in the canopy, slow and deliberate. Too heavy for the knifeman, too steady for anything that had come through the breach. Jim's eyes flicked upward, then back to me. We didn't speak it out loud, but we both knew. The enforcer. It was watching, judging, not moving to help. Not yet. The hollowed elk turned away, stepping back into the shimmer without a sound. The breach swallowed it like water closing over a stone. Smith exhaled slowly. "That thing up there. Not ours to worry about," I said. "Not unless we give it a reason." Jim knelt, setting the EMP rifle across his knee, and began making the adjustments for range. The hum was so strong now my fingers buzzed when I gripped my AR-15. The fog beyond the shimmer rippled, not from wind, but from something tall and thin moving inside it. The knifeman. It stopped just short of the edge, head cocked, knife fingers flexing. The pits where its eyes should have been seemed deeper in the breach light. It didn't come through, not yet. It was waiting for us to. The knifeman didn't move. It just stood there at the edge of the breach, long legs bent the wrong way, knife fingers flexing slow like it was testing how sharp the air was. The shimmer between us pulsed once, faint like a heartbeat. The hum in my bones turned into a throb behind the eyes. 2 more steps and it's ours, Jim said quietly, the EMP rifle already braced to his shoulder. Smith had his Mini 14 up, cheek tight to the stock. "Feels like it's trying to pull me in." "It is," I said. "Stay where the ground still belongs to you." The fog behind the knifeman swirled, and for just a breath I saw other shapes moving in there, tall, crawling, some just drifting. The breach wasn't empty. It was stacked. The knife man tilted its head, those black pits locking on Jim. Then it slid forward. No step, no lunge, just there, half the distance gone in less than a second. "Light it up," I snapped. Smith fired first, 3 quick rounds center mass. The thing jerked, but didn't stop. I followed with a controlled burst from the AR-15, rounds punching through that narrow torso like I was shooting wet rope. The knifeman didn't slow. It came in low, one arm whipping toward me. I dropped under the swing, felt the air shear past my face like it had weight. The other arm snapped toward Smith, forcing him back a step, barrel coming up just in time to keep his head on his shoulders. "Jim!" I barked. The EMP cracked, not like a gunshot, more like the pop of a heavy breaker flipping in a closed room. The air itself flared white for a fraction of a second, the hum peaking so high it was almost silent. The knifeman spasmed mid-step. The knife fingers twitched once, then curled inward like burnt paper. Its legs locked, joints bent wrong, and it pitched sideways into the dirt, limbs still trembling as the fog began to crawl over it. Jim worked the bolt on the EMP rifle, voice flat. 2 shots left. We backed off, rifles covering the thing. The trembling slowed, then stopped. The knifeman's head turned toward the breach like it was trying to look home one last time. Then it went still. The fog around the body shifted. A heavy weight settled above us in the canopy, branches groaning under it. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. The enforcer didn't show himself fully. Just a hint of massive shape between dead limbs, the glint of pale eyes watching us through the green-black mist. The gaze wasn't hostile. It wasn't friendly either. It was acknowledgement. We'd done what needed doing, and we hadn't crossed his line. The shape shifted, weight moving off into the deeper canopy. No sound of descent, no sign in the fog, gone. Jim slung the EMP rifle, still watching the breach. "We need to go before the rest of whatever's in there decides to test the wire." Smith nodded, eyes still on the shimmer. "We're coming back." "Maybe," I said, "but not without more than 3 shots." We turned our backs on the breach and started the climb out of the basin, the hum in our bones fading with each step. The fog stayed behind, so did the knife man, for now. We didn't speak for the first 100 yards out of the basin. The hum was fading, but the pressure it left behind sat heavy in my chest, like I'd been holding my breath for hours. Every step felt like putting distance between myself and a fire I couldn't see. Smith kept glancing over his shoulder, the way a man does when the hair on his neck tells him the job isn't quite done. Jim walked point, EMP rifle slung but ready, his pace steady and deliberate. I took the rear, eyes working every shadow the fog tried to hide. The DRZ wasn't letting us go easy. The green mist clung to our boots, curling in low eddies that followed until the slope pulled them back toward the basin. The trees still leaned at wrong angles, and the smell of rot and copper lingered, though weaker now. We topped the last rise before the outer markers, the twin pines where the dirt road waited somewhere beyond the fog. All 3 of us stopped at the crest without saying why. The basin was just visible between the trunks behind us, the breach hidden in the spin of green-black fog. And then we saw him. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. Bigfoot, the enforcer of the DRZ. He stood at the far edge of the basin, half shrouded by the mist, and still his sheer size made the trees seem smaller. A hulking silhouette of muscle and dark hair, shoulders as wide as a pickup hood, chest like the front wall of a cabin. His arms hung low, the length of them wrong for any man, hands big enough to wrap around a grown deer's ribcage. His head tilted slightly as he watched us, the crown of it lost in the fog. And then his eyes caught the dim light, 2 white points, glowing faint but steady, like cold fire in a cave. It wasn't rage in that stare. It wasn't welcome either. It was judgment. For a second, none of us moved. My heartbeat slowed, not sped up, the way it does when something too big to fight decides whether you're a problem. Smith's knuckles tightened on his rifle stock. Jim's hand rested on the EMP sling but didn't lift it. And then, as quick as a blink, he was gone. No crash of brush, no sound of steps. The space he'd filled simply became fog again, the same way a dream leaves the air when you wake. We stayed there a moment longer, each of us knowing we'd just been weighed and left standing. Then Jim turned without a word, leading us between the twin pines. Smith followed. I took the last look, the fog closing over the basin, and knew he'd be there again if we ever came back, watching. Thank you for stepping into the shadows with us. If you enjoyed this tale, subscribe to Sinister Phantom Tales and make sure to like and share this story with your bravest friends. New hauntings emerge every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so stay close. The next tale may be darker than the last. Every story you hear is original, born from the blood-soaked soil of Tehama County, the cursed woods of Lassen National Forest, and the ancient secrets beneath Mount Shasta. These are not just stories. These are sinister phantom tales. Sleep tight.